My sister made me install cameras in my car after her assault. I thought she was paranoid until my driving instructor disabled them and attacked me. 7 years later, he's out of prison and just applied to teach my daughter's driver's ed class. When I was 12, my older sister was R-worded by a police officer who pulled her over on the side of the road. She was in the hospital for 2 weeks and never told anyone what happened. She just kept saying, he had a badge. No one will believe me. The bruises on her wrist told their own story. Purple and black like storm clouds against her pale skin. She wouldn't let anyone touch her for months after that, flinching whenever someone moved too quickly or spoke too loudly. For years after that, my sister became obsessed with recording everything. I had to FaceTime her whenever I went anywhere. Grocery store, park, gym, everything. She'd make me show her the parking lot before I got out of the car, scan the aisles as I shopped, keep the camera on even in bathroom stalls. My entire life was dictated by a fear of something that never even happened to me. So when I turned 16, she got me a car. A used Honda Civic, nothing fancy, but reliable. But before she handed me the keys, she'd installed 4 different cameras, dashboard, rear view, and 2 hidden ones pointing at the driver and passenger seats. The installation took her 3 days, working late into the night with YouTube tutorials and a determination that bordered on obsession. She made me promise to never turn them off. You're being paranoid, I told her, watching as she tested each camera feed on her laptop. Not every cop is bad. It's not about good or bad, she said, her fingers trembling slightly as she adjusted the angle of the rear-facing camera. It's about evidence, but everyone at school thought it was weird. My friends refused to ride with me because they didn't want to be recorded. Sarah, my best friend since middle school, actually laughed when she saw them. What is this? An FBI surveillance van? My boyfriend broke up with me because he said it felt like my sister was always watching. He texted me the breakup, too cowardly to even say it to my face. Or maybe just too uncomfortable doing it in my car. I started to resent her for making me the weird girl with the surveillance car. When I started driving lessons to get my license, my instructor was Lieutenant Morrison, aka Lieutenant Dan. He was ex-military, ran the best driving school in town, and had a wall full of awards. His office was like a shrine to his accomplishments. Commendations from the Army, certificates from the DMV, photos with the mayor. Parents specifically requested him because he was old school and taught respect along with driving. My mom had been thrilled when we got him. You're so lucky, she'd said. He's booked months in advance. On my 3rd lesson, he noticed the cameras. We were practicing lane changes on the highway when his eyes caught the red recording light on the dashboard. Did your parents install these? He asked, his weathered face creasing into a frown. My sister, I said. She's protective. He shook his head, pulling into a rest stop to examine them more closely. How can I teach you properly if I'm being watched? It makes me nervous. And if I'm nervous, you'll be nervous. That's how accidents happen. He had a point. My sister's paranoia was ruining my life. For the test, he said, leaning back in the passenger seat, his bulk making the car feel smaller. They'll fail you if they see these. Unauthorized recording devices. State Regulation 247.3. I can show you how to temporarily disable them just for lessons and the test. Then you can turn them back on after you pass. So I let him show me. It was easy, just unplugging a few wires under the dash. His hands were steady and sure, like he'd done this before. He even had a special tool in his glove compartment. Said he kept it for students with overprotective parents. He promised that we'd reconnect them after my test next week. My final lesson was on a Thursday. The November air was crisp, leaves swirling across the empty roads. We were supposed to practice parallel parking downtown, but Lieutenant Dan said he knew a better spot, an old lot by the industrial district where the DMV used to test people. More room to practice, he said, directing me through unfamiliar streets. Less pressure, no one watching and judging. The lot was empty. No other cars, no buildings nearby, just cracked asphalt and faded yellow lines barely visible under years of weather and neglect. Chain link fence on 3 sides, rusted and bent in places. The 4th side opened onto a service road that looked like it hadn't seen traffic in years. Let's work on your 3-point turn, he said. But when I put the car in reverse, he grabbed the wheel. His grip was iron strong, military training evident in the way he controlled the vehicle without seeming to exert any effort. Actually, he said, and his voice was different now, quieter, lower, the jovial instructor persona dropping like a mask. Let's talk about respect. I tried to reach for my phone in the cup holder, but he already had it. His movements were so smooth I hadn't even seen him take it. Paranoid families, he said, reaching into his jacket. Always think they're so smart with their cameras. But you gave me the one thing your sister couldn't protect you from, your trust. The rest was a blur. I remember screaming. I remember him saying I was just like the others. Proud girls who needed to learn. His breath smelled like coffee and something medicinal. I remember finally getting the door open and running, leaving my keys, my phone, everything. My feet pounded on the broken asphalt, then grass, then gravel. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs shook. A woman at a gas station 2 miles away called 911 for me. She gave me water and a blanket, kept asking if I needed a hospital. I couldn't stop shaking. When the police arrived at the lot, Lieutenant Dan was gone. So was my car. They found it 3 days later, wiped clean. No fingerprints, no DNA, no footage, because I'd let him disconnect the cameras. But they did find something else in his garage. 7 other keys. 7 other cars he'd borrowed from students. 7 other girls whose families were too paranoid and who he'd convinced to trust him instead. Each key had a small tag with initials and dates going back years. 3 came forward. The others were too scared, or their families had moved away, or they'd been told no one would believe them because Lieutenant Morrison was a hero, a veteran, a respected member of the community with a wall full of awards. He'd been doing it for 12 years. The detective told us he specifically chose students with protective families because he knew we'd be desperate to prove we didn't need protection. He knew exactly what to say to make us disconnect our own safety nets. He'd refined his technique over the years, perfected his approach, but I wasn't even worried because that wasn't the only camera my sister had installed, and I was about to ruin his life. See, my sister wasn't just paranoid. She was smart, really smart. When she gave me the car, she didn't just install the obvious cameras. She put in a backup system that even I didn't know about. A tiny camera hidden in the rearview mirror housing that uploaded directly to cloud storage. It ran on its own battery and had its own data connection. She'd been paying for it monthly without telling me. I found out when I got home from the police station. My sister was waiting in my room with her laptop open. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was unwashed, pulled back in a messy bun, and she was wearing the same clothes I'd seen her in 2 days ago. I told her everything and watched her face go from worried to furious to something else entirely. Cold, calculated, the same look she'd had in the hospital all those years ago when she decided no one would help her. She pulled up an app on her phone I'd never seen before, Cloud Secure or something like that, with military-grade encryption according to the login screen. There it was, crystal clear footage of everything. Lieutenant Dan grabbing the wheel, him taking my phone, his face when he said those things about proud girls, the way his expression had changed, predator to prey in seconds when I'd managed to escape. Everything the police said they needed but couldn't get from the wiped cameras. But my sister didn't immediately hand it over. She sat there for a long time, just staring at the screen. Her fingers drummed on the desk, a nervous habit from childhood. Then she started typing. She made copies, lots of copies, uploaded them to different servers, emailed them to herself with different accounts. She even burned them onto physical discs, labeling each one with the date and her signature. I asked her what she was doing. She said she learned her lesson about trusting the system with evidence. They lose things, she said. said. Or things get corrupted. Or someone accidentally deletes the file. Always have backups of your backups. We went back to the police the next morning. The detective, a woman named Rodriguez, watched the footage 3 times. Her face got tighter with each viewing. She called in 2 other officers, then her supervisor. Within an hour, they had a warrant. But when they went to arrest Lieutenant Dan, he wasn't at his house. His driving school was closed. A hastily printed sign saying, "Family emergency," taped to the door. His car was gone. Rodriguez called us that afternoon. They'd found his car at his brother's house 2 towns over. He'd been staying there, but left an hour before they arrived. Someone had tipped him off. The brother claimed he didn't know anything, but Rodriguez didn't buy it. Neither did my sister. She started her own investigation. Not anything illegal, just social media stalking and public record searches. She barely slept, fueled by coffee and rage. Turns out Lieutenant Dan had a pattern. Every few years, he'd move to a new town, start a new driving school, build up a reputation. Then something would happen, and he'd disappear. My sister found 6 different towns, 6 different driving schools, always with glowing reviews until they suddenly closed. Always the same story. A trusted instructor, a pillar of the community, until he wasn't. She printed everything out and gave it to Rodriguez, highlighted the patterns, the similarities in the business names, the gaps in his employment history that lined up with the closures. But Rodriguez had bad news for us. The footage, while damning, might not be enough. Lieutenant Dan's lawyer, and somehow he already had one, the expensive one from the city, was already arguing that the hidden camera was illegal, that I was a minor and couldn't consent to being recorded without my knowledge, that the footage was inadmissible. He was trying to get the whole case thrown out on a technicality. My sister lost it. I'd never seen her that angry. She threw a glass against the wall, screamed about how the system was broken, how they always protected themselves, how victims never got justice. I thought she was going to do something stupid, but instead, she got quiet. Scary quiet. The kind of quiet that meant she was planning something. She told me to pack a bag. We were going on a road trip. I didn't understand why we needed to leave town. My sister just kept saying we needed to find the others, the other girls. She had their initials from the key tags the police found, and she'd cross-referenced them with DMV records from the towns where Lieutenant Dan had operated. It took her less than a day to find names and addresses. She worked through the night, fueled by black coffee and a determination I'd never seen before. Her laptop screen glowed in the darkness of our living room, casting shadows across her face as she typed furiously, muttering to herself about patterns and timelines. Our first stop was 3 hours north, a small college town surrounded by cornfields. A girl named Jessica, who'd taken lessons with him 4 years ago. Her family had moved twice since then, but my sister tracked them down through forwarding addresses and social media. She'd printed out maps, highlighted routes, even checked construction reports to avoid delays. Nothing was left to chance. Jessica's mom answered the door of their modest 2-story house. She looked tired, suspicious, her hand gripping the door frame like she might slam it shut at any moment. When my sister explained why we were there, her face went white. She called for her husband, and we spent 20 minutes on their front porch, explaining everything while neighbors walked dogs and kids rode bikes past us, oblivious to the weight of our conversation. Jessica didn't want to talk at first. She was in college now, pre-med, trying to move on with her life. She sat across from us in their living room, arms crossed, jaw set. The walls were covered with her achievements, honor roll certificates, science fair ribbons, acceptance letters. But when my sister showed her the footage from my car, she broke down. Same story. Same empty lot behind an abandoned warehouse. Same lesson about respect. She'd never told anyone except her parents, and they decided not to pursue it. No evidence. His word against hers. Why put her through that? Her mother held her while she cried, shooting us looks that were equal parts gratitude and resentment. We'd brought this back into their lives, forced them to relive something they'd tried so hard to bury. But Jessica had something we didn't expect. A journal. She'd written everything down right after it happened, dated and detailed. Her therapist had suggested it. She'd never shown it to police because her parents didn't want her involved. But now, seeing that he was still doing it, she photocopied the pages for us. Her hands shook as she fed each page into their home printer, the machine humming and clicking in the quiet room. The next girl, Amanda, lived 2 states over. The drive took us all night. My sister drove while I slept fitfully in the passenger seat, waking every time we stopped for gas or hit a rough patch of road. I kept dreaming about that empty lot, waking up gasping. The highway stretched endlessly before us, lit only by our headlights and the occasional semi-truck. My sister had prepared snacks, water bottles, even printed directions in case her phone died, always prepared for the worst. Amanda was harder to convince. She lived in a nice apartment complex with a doorman and security cameras. She'd built a whole new life, had a fiancé who didn't know. She begged us to leave her alone, standing in her doorway like she couldn't decide whether to let us in or call security. Her engagement ring caught the hallway light as she gestured, pleading with us to understand. My sister didn't push. She just left her number and said if Amanda changed her mind, we'd be there. She spoke softly, gently, like she was talking to a spooked animal. We were walking back to the car when Amanda came running after us, barefoot on the cold parking garage concrete. She couldn't testify, she said, but she had something. Security footage from a gas station near where it happened. She'd gotten it from the owner years ago, planning to use it, but never did. It showed Lieutenant Dan's car leaving the area at the exact time she said. Not proof of the assault, but proof he'd lied about where he was that day. She handed us a USB drive, warned us it was the only copy, then ran back inside without another word. We spent a week on the road, living out of cheap motels and my sister's meticulously packed supplies. 7 girls scattered across 3 states, 3 willing to come forward, 4 who gave us evidence but wanted to stay anonymous. Photos, journals, text messages they'd sent to friends right after. One girl, Maria, had actually recorded him on her phone without him knowing. Just audio, but you could hear him talking about teaching her respect, could hear her crying, could hear the car doors locking. Each meeting was different. Some girls met us in public places, coffee shops, libraries, parks. Others invited us into their homes, their safe spaces. One girl, Sarah, met us at her church after hours. She said it was the only place she felt protected enough to talk about it. The empty pews seemed to listen as she told her story, her voice echoing slightly in the vast space. My sister organized everything into folders, color-coded, indexed, cross-referenced. She made multiple copies of everything, working at 24-hour copy shops to avoid leaving digital trails, mailed some to Rodriguez, uploaded some to secure servers, even sent a set to our aunt who was a paralegal in another state. She was building a case the police couldn't ignore or lose. Each piece of evidence was logged, dated, and verified. She created timelines, maps showing his movement patterns, charts demonstrating how he selected victims. But Lieutenant Dan was still missing. His brother claimed he'd gone camping, didn't know where. Rodriguez had alerts out, but he'd disappeared before. He knew how to stay hidden. My sister was getting more frustrated each day. She'd check her phone constantly, hoping for news. She barely slept, surviving on caffeine and determination. I'd find her at 3 in the morning, staring at her evidence boards, looking for patterns everyone else had missed. Then she had an idea, a terrible, dangerous idea. She wanted to use me as bait, set up a meeting, pretend I wanted to apologize, to drop the charges, get him to come out of hiding. I told her she was crazy. Rodriguez would never approve it. It was too dangerous. We argued for hours, our voices echoing in the empty house. She said it was the only way. I said there had to be another option. Neither of us would budge. But my sister wasn't planning to tell Rodriguez. She'd already started putting out feelers, posted on some driving instruction forums about about looking for a new teacher after a misunderstanding with my previous one. Used a fake name, but included enough details that Lieutenant Dan might recognize the situation. She figured his ego wouldn't let him resist. He'd want to know what I was planning, want to control the narrative again. I should have stopped her. Should have called Rodriguez myself. But part of me wanted him caught too. Wanted this to be over. Wanted to stop jumping at every car that looked like his. And my sister swore she'd be careful. We'd meet in a public place. Lots of people around. She'd be watching from nearby. She had contingency plans for her contingency plans. What could go wrong? The response came after 3 days of checking the fake email account every hour. Not from Lieutenant Dan directly, but from a friend who said he knew an excellent instructor who specialized in nervous students. Very understanding about past troubles. The email address was generic, but the writing style was familiar. That same condescending tone. That same emphasis on respect and trust. The same way of making offers sound like favors. My sister set up the meeting. A busy coffee shop downtown. 2 in the afternoon. Lots of witnesses. She'd be at the table next to mine. Rodriguez would be in the parking lot, even though we hadn't exactly told her the truth about how this meeting came about. We'd said Lieutenant Dan had reached out to me wanting to explain his side. She didn't like it, but agreed to have units nearby. My sister had scouted the location 3 times, memorizing exits, checking sightlines, even timing how long it took to get from the bathroom to the front door. I got there early, ordered a coffee I couldn't drink. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the cup. The ceramic rattled against the saucer every time I set it down. My sister sat 2 tables away, pretending to work on her laptop. She dyed her hair and wore sunglasses, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Could see her fingers hovering over her phone, ready to call for help. The coffee shop was perfect. Busy enough to feel safe, quiet enough to record conversation. Business people on lunch breaks, college students studying, moms with strollers. Normal people living normal lives, unaware of what was about to happen at table 12. He walked in at exactly 2. Same khaki pants, pressed with military precision. Same polo shirt with the driving school logo, even though the school was closed. He looked older somehow, tired. There were new lines around his eyes, gray in his hair I hadn't noticed before. He sat down across from me and smiled that instructor smile. Calm, patient, like nothing had happened, like we were about to discuss parallel parking techniques. He ordered a black coffee, made small talk about the weather while we waited for it to arrive. His hands were steady, his voice was even. If you didn't know better, you'd think he was exactly what he appeared to be, a concerned teacher meeting with a troubled student. He started talking about misunderstandings, about how young people sometimes interpreted things wrong, about how he'd been teaching for 20 years without a single complaint until now. He said he understood I was scared, that my sister had filled my head with paranoia. He could help me see things clearly if I just trust him. His voice was hypnotic, soothing. I could see how girls had believed him before. I wanted to throw my coffee in his face, wanted to scream, wanted everyone in the shop to know what he was, but I had to keep him talking. Rodriguez needed him to say something incriminating, so I nodded, played along, asked him why he'd left town if he hadn't done anything wrong, kept my voice small, uncertain, like maybe I was starting to doubt myself. His face changed then, just for a second. That same look from the car, the mask slipping to reveal something darker underneath. Then the mask was back. He said his lawyer had advised him to lay low, said people like my sister could be dangerous when they got fixated on something, said he was actually worried about me, being influenced by someone so unstable. He reached across the table like he might pat my hand, and I had to force myself not to recoil. That's when my sister stood up. I don't know if she planned it or if she just snapped. She walked over to our table, calm as could be, and set her laptop down in front of him. The screen showed the cloud footage, his face grabbing the wheel, him taking my phone, crystal clear. She'd enhanced it, zoomed in on his face. You could see the moment he decided to take me to that empty lot, could see the calculation in his eyes. He went pale, started to stand up, his coffee cup tipped over, spreading across the table in a dark puddle. But Rodriguez was already coming through the door with 2 other officers. They'd been listening through the wire I was wearing, had heard him trying to gaslight me. Combined with the footage and the other girl's evidence, it was enough. The arrest was quiet, no drama. He didn't resist, just kept saying he wanted his lawyer. The coffee shop patrons watched in stunned silence as they let him out. As they let him past the window, he looked back at me, not angry, just disappointed, like I'd failed some test, like I'd proven I wasn't strong enough to keep a secret, like I'd broken some sacred trust between teacher and student. The trial took 6 months. His lawyer tried every trick, said the footage was doctored, said the other girls were copying my story for attention, said my sister had orchestrated everything because of her own trauma, but the evidence was too much. 7 girls with similar stories, documentation going back years, the pattern of moving towns and changing names, the key collection that he couldn't explain away. The other girls were brave. Jessica testified via video link from her college, her voice steady as she recounted every detail. Amanda submitted a written statement that was read aloud by the prosecutor. Even Maria, who'd been the most scared, agreed to play her audio recording in court. Each testimony built on the last. Each detail corroborated the pattern, the empty lots, the lessons about respect, the way he'd disconnect the emergency brake. Lieutenant Dan took the stand in his own defense, still playing the respected instructor, still talking about trust and respect and how he dedicated his life to keeping young drivers safe. He brought his medals, his certificates, letters from grateful parents whose children he'd taught, but the prosecutor tore him apart, asked him about the key collection, about the closed driving schools, about why he specifically targeted students with protective families. He actually admitted that last part, said overprotective families created nervous drivers, said he had techniques to help them relax and trust the process. The prosecutor asked if those techniques included taking students to isolated locations, if they included disconnecting safety devices, if they included physical assault. Each question was precise, surgical, designed to strip away his defenses. His lawyer objected to everything, but the damage was done. The jury could see what he was, could see through the medals and certificates to the predator underneath. It took them less than 2 hours to convict. 7 counts of assault, 3 counts of kidnapping, 1 count of theft for taking my car, guilty on all charges. The sentencing was last week. The courthouse was packed. Other girls had come forward after the trial started, though too late to testify. They sat in the gallery, silent witnesses to their own stories. 25 years. Not enough for what he did, but enough to keep him away from other girls. The judge called him a systematic predator who used his position of trust to target vulnerable young women. She said the evidence was overwhelming and the pattern of behavior was clear. She thanked my sister specifically for her diligent documentation. After the sentencing, the other girls and I met up outside the courthouse. We didn't plan it, just all ended up there, drawn together by shared experience. Jessica hugged me, said my sister saved her from years of thinking she was crazy. Amanda cried. Maria just stood there, finally looking peaceful. We exchanged numbers, promised to keep in touch. A support group born from trauma but sustained by survival. My sister didn't come to the sentencing, said she didn't need to see it. She'd already won. She'd proven that evidence matters, that documentation matters, that being paranoid isn't crazy if you're right. She'd spent so many years feeling helpless about what happened to her. This was her victory too. I found her at home, finally sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. She still has those cameras in my car, still insists I keep them running, but I don't mind anymore. I've seen what happens when you trust the wrong person. I've seen how quickly someone can go from protector to predator. The cameras aren't about paranoia now. They're about power. The power to prove what really happened. The power to be believed. Rodriguez pulled me aside after the trial, thanked me for being being brave. Said most victims never come forward. Said the evidence we'd gathered was the most comprehensive she'd seen in 20 years. Then she asked about the meeting at the coffee shop, how we'd really known he'd be there. She already knew, I could tell, but she needed to hear it from me. I told her the truth. About my sister's fake posts, about baiting him out. I expected her to be angry, but she just shook her head and smiled. Said my sister would make a good detective. Said sometimes the system needed people who wouldn't give up. She gave me her direct number. Said to call if we ever needed anything. My sister's different now. Still protective, still careful, but the anger is gone. That cold rage that had driven her for years. She smiles more, sleeps better, started dating again. She even took down some of the cameras in her own apartment. Not all of them, but some. Progress comes in small steps. She's helping other girls now. Set up a website about safety resources, hidden cameras, legal rights, how to document incidents. She gets emails every week from families dealing with similar situations. Sometimes she helps them find lawyers. Sometimes she just listens. She always tells them the same thing. Evidence matters. Documentation matters. Being prepared isn't paranoid. She's building an army of protected girls, one camera at a time.